This is a resistive power divider. It contains 7 resistors of about 40 ohms. I'm going to send the same signal into several SDR receivers, and this thing gives a reasonable isolation between them. That means if the impedance is very far from 50 ohms in one of the units, it will not affect the signals to the other SDRs much. This cable comes from an antenna some distance from the house. It goes to a 4-port T connector. Here the antenna signal is combined with 2 signal generators, and the result is sent to a T connector here, where the signal is attenuated by 3 decibels in both directions. That's to restore a reasonable impedance, because just connecting cables in parallel, like I showed, destroys the impedance. That doesn't matter, because I'm just interested in relative levels for this experiment. But from this point on, I want to keep impedances right, so there are 2 3 dB attenuators, and here is a 7-port resistive power divider. And here is another one. And 1 port on each side is to send signal into the power splitter, and one of the ports has a dummy load to load it by 50 ohms. The other ones have 6 decibels of attenuation. So from here we have 5 different signals going, and from the other there are 5 more signals going away through 6 decibels of attenuation. One of them goes into this. It's an Elad FDM S1. One goes into this mixer after having passed a filter, and then an amplifier, and it goes into a card that sits on the PCIe bus in the computer. Here are dongles. It's an R820 here, and this one is an E4000 dongle. Here is a FunCube Pro Plus. And I can't get it sharp, it seems. No? This is another E4000 tuner with the RTL2832 chip. Here is one Mirics dongle, and here is another Mirics dongle. So this computer has the Elad and 2 Mirics, and the other computer has more SDRs. This spectrum analyzer is hooked up the same way like the SDRs. Here I can read signal levels. The mixer which goes into the computer has the local oscillator at 85 megahertz. That is to provide the FM band in the HF region. And here is a test signal that I can vary. And here is another one that I can vary continuously. With this setup, it is possible to compare the properties of the different SDRs on the FM band. I have icons down here to run the different SDRs with Linrad. I will start with Elad, and I have to press E to go into the FM mode. And it takes a long time to initiate. This is the window of the XTO module for the Elad. Here is the FM band. The sampling speed is a little bit above 3 megahertz. And I can click on this. This is the local FM station. And it is a little noisy, but not much. If I click a little bit on the side, like that, you can see that the signal level is maybe 8 decibels or something of that order. Signal to noise ratio. The bandwidth is 200 kilohertz. Now I can apply a signal generator here and step it down to the same, like that, and then set it to the same level that the FM station has. And I don't remember exactly. I will go back and check. That's the FM station. And this is the test signal. Now they are very similar. I have to send minus 56 dBm into this setup to make this signal generator equally strong as the FM station. On the spectrum analyzer I don't expect to see much. Frequency 90 megahertz, span 10 megahertz, and amplitude we don't see much. But I can step this up by 50 dB, amplitude minus 6 dBm, and now I can see the signal here nicely, and we have minus 41.5 dBm. Well, don't worry about the decimals. Minus 41 dBm. That is plus the 50 that I stepped up, or rather minus the 50 that I stepped up. It means minus 91 dBm. That is the signal that goes into all the SDR receivers. This minus 91 dBm signal is 8 dB above the noise floor, and therefore the noise floor is minus 99 dBm in 200 kilohertz bandwidth. In 1 hertz bandwidth it has to be 53 dB lower, and that means minus 152. Room temperature is minus 174, and that means that the noise figure of the Elad is about 22 dB, which is not very impressive on the FM band. One would need a preamplifier to receive DX signals. And that's perfectly okay, because to DX one needs an antenna, and the amplifier should sit near the antenna to compensate for losses in cables. Now when I switch on again,
då kan du bara byta ut vinet till ett alkoholfritt vin, och det finns.
And then I switch on the signal that is now still 50 decibels stronger. We can see here that the noise floor goes up by about 1 dB. That's not enough to make an audible difference in the detected signal-to-noise ratio, but I can increase the level a little bit, make it 5 dB steps. So I go up.
Det är jättefint med den gula sorbeten och den champagnen som också skiftar i gyllene.
And now it is clearly a degradation. I can switch it off. And you can see here the peak power, that's the white track, and the RMS power, that's the yellow track. They differ much more. We have a lot of AM noise. That means the white noise that originates in this signal here. This is some kind of reciprocal mixing. It could be the noise sidebands from the signal generator, or it could be the reciprocal mixing of the Elad. To investigate that, I go and listen to another radio. This is the PCIe 9842. That's the card sitting in the PCIe bus of the other computer, and this has a sampling speed of 25 megahertz, but it's not INQ. It goes from DC to 12.5 megahertz. It has a mixer in front of it with the LO frequency of 85 megahertz. So the same station we were listening to before is here, and I can switch off I can switch on the signal generator that caused a noise floor increase in the other.
Du skär bort fettet eller kroppen på köttet? Just här, i det här fallet vill man bara ha själva köttet.
So 200 kilohertz bandwidth to make it comparable.
Jag tycker det är godast att ha med både fettkappa och allt annat som.
And now the signal is switched on. The signal that made a difference in the Elad makes no difference here. You just can see the key and click when I switched it on, and here it is, pretty strong. And I can increase the level. And now there is a small increase in the noise floor. And if we look at the peak power, you can see so checking the other radio, the Elad here, and I want to listen to it. You can see the If I switch off this interference signal, so it's very clear that this is the limitation of the Elad. Going away in frequency, I can make frequency steps of, let's say, 1 megahertz upwards, 2 megahertz off, on, and look here. It's off.
Det här blir ju magiskt till själva för den är fortfarande exakt så. Det är så pass mycket olja och
so that's 2 megahertz frequency separation, and this is probably the flat noise floor. Knowing the architecture of the Elad, there is not much I step upwards in frequency a little bit more. And it doesn't help. I switch off this channel. And you can look here.
Ja, lite så. Den här rätten går väldigt, väldigt bra. Och då, som ett tillbehör så är det en rotselleri som också kör i ugnen hel. Har borstat bort om det är grus på den.
It doesn't matter much where the signal is. There are spurs, many spurs, but they are not stronger than the desired signal, and the probability of getting them within 200 kilohertz is not very large. So you can see that this converter and DC coupled HF sampler, the PCIe 9842, is quite a bit better. Now it is very much more expensive also.
Så det är liksom både konfiterad äggula och en konfiterad.
Here I am running a Logitech dongle with the MSI 3001 chipset, simultaneously with an Elad FDM S1 SDR. The dongle is running at 5 megahertz and with 0 EIF and the 14-bit format, while the Elad is running at 3.07 megahertz. From the S-meter graph, you can see here that the dongle is more sensitive. It has a lower noise figure. The Elad was established before to have a noise figure of about 22 dB. The signal to noise ratio is 8 dB. I can check that. I have to go outside where the splatter has disappeared. So this is the noise floor, and here is the signal. And it's about 8 dB. The dongle, if I go outside and check the noise floor here, we can see it is 10, 20, 22, maybe 23 dB signal to noise ratio. So it is about 15 dB better signal to noise ratio here, which means that the noise figure is 15 dB below the 22 from the Elad, and that is 7 dB. And this is fairly approximate. It's not the point of this study to do detailed evaluation. I want to show the general behavior. The dongle is running at maximum gain, this is obviously not how it should be run, but I have started there to show some of the things that happen. I press A, and that gives me the amplitude margins. It's only about 2-bit left to come to saturation of the AD converter. For the Elad, it's completely different. I press A here, and it says 80 decibels. So there is a lot of margin on the AD converter here. Now, the reason for the dongle to be so close to saturation is, of course, the very high gain. I can reduce the gain by clicking this arrow, and you can see that the separation between the peak power and the RMS power in the signal in the S-meter graph doesn't change. Well, now it starts to change. I have to move up a bit, and the reason is this hump. This is an interference that happens to come into the signal region. I have to look here, we can see it, and if I change the scale on the waterfall, you can see here as well as here. And if I go up again with the gain, you can see this thing moves depending on the signal level. This is some oddity with the AD converter. I can add some other signal. I switch on a signal generator. Here it comes very close to the mirror image frequency. That's not what I want. I move it a little bit further away and increase the amplitude. And you can see these odd phenomena disappear when there is enough signal to sweep many enough bits on the AD converter. It seems like some kind of dithering, or I don't know. Anyway, you can see now the signal to noise ratio is essentially back. I can go down with the gain further. And now we start to see some degradation. And here is a dramatic step. That's because at this point the LNA is switched out and the IF gain is increased to compensate, to give just a single dB gain step. So 42 is not enough gain for a reasonable sensitivity. I go back here, and this could be a suitable level to recommend for the dongle for a comparison with the FDM S1. If I switch off the signal generator, you can see there is a very small difference. Because the oddities happen to be not on the same frequency as the signal. If they would be, I could just change the center frequency to have them on some other place. As you can hear, there is very little noise. I can check that by looking at the noise floor on this side. I have to go a little bit further away to get out from the splatter. So this is the noise on the low side, and here is the noise on the high side. It's maybe 3 decibels higher. That's typical for an AD converter. The noise is lowest fairly at rather low frequencies, and it goes up at higher frequencies. Very high up, the gain is a little bit lower, so the noise doesn't go up anymore. And I go back to the signal, and you can see I have 10 dB, so it is now 2 dB more sensitive than the Elad. And this goes into saturation. The red, I don't want that. And you cannot hear the noise. I go for and now increase the level of the signal generator. This is an interference source. And we don't notice. Here there is saturation. That's too much signal. If I switch off, there is a little noise in the background, but not much. I go for the Elad. And it has noise already without the signal generator, and I add the signal generator, and it has a profound influence. You can see here on the peak noise that goes up. And I can step the frequency. And you can see here, things happen. I will go back. This is to give an impression about what the behavior is. Detailed information comes from measurements. Accurate measurements can be made in a more controlled fashion than in this setup. So I switch off the Elad and switch on the dongle. So, and step the frequency further away. When the signal disappears here, it comes back here as an alias, but it's now getting outside the filter. I have applied the 5 MHz filter in the chipset. So you can see the alias suppression is fairly good. The signal is now weaker than the desired signal. So I step back. You can see the sideband noise on both sides of the signal. That's reciprocal mixing from the VCO in the dongle. Here you can see the reciprocal mixing noise enters the 200 kilohertz passband. The signal is here, it's only 50 kilohertz outside, so it's too close. Now we have the signal in the passband, and now it's 50 kilohertz outside on the other side. And here it doesn't disturb us anymore. But here since this is a zero IF system, this strong signal, it is at about, what could it be, 300 kilohertz, and twice that happens to come on the signal. So this is non-linearities in the IF. And when I go closer, you can see there are many of them. So here is another one, which is here. It creates interference. And again. But when the strong signals gets away from the center, the separation between these harmonics becomes bigger. And here is the mirror image. And it's quite clear we have no problems. I go for 5 dB more signal, and that saturates. The signal level for this test is, as you can see here, minus 25 or minus 26 dB, and the signal is at minus 91. So that gives the dynamic range for a wideband FM in 200 kilohertz bandwidth, about 91 to 25 dBm. And that's about the same for the dongle and for the Elad FDM S1. The dongle is a little better, but not very much, but the dongle has these nonlinearities problems for signals near the center frequency.
Orlando berättar historien utifrån sin identitet som kvinna.
This is the FunCube Pro Plus dongle.
Både som tema och på ett konkret
It is running at maximum gain.
Vi spelade på scen.
Maximum permitted gain, that is. We are 1.5 dB from saturation here. If I increase gain further,
men i den inledande bilden,
you go into saturation, there is distortion, and this is totally useless. And remember, this is a single signal at minus 91 dBm.
En mycket skicklig maskör, till synes helt autentiska silikonskapelser. Mitt på den manliga kroppen.
This is about
om ni som lyssnar kan försöka
the
se
maximum
den bilden
gain we can have.
Teater.
The signal level is at 125 on the dB scale. I changed the frequency. And you see the noise floor is at 98. So that means we have, what did I say? 98 to 125. That is 27 dB. That's 19 dB better than the Elad, which means that the noise figure is about 3 dB for this unit. Looking at both the peak and the RMS, we can see here some information about the signal-to-noise ratio. Now, the bandwidth is not quite big enough. The sampling speed is 192 kilohertz for this dongle. But I turned down the gain. And you can see the signal comes weaker, but first now we can see there is a degradation of the noise figure.
Jag var 16 år och förälskad i döden, min egen, mina förfäders. Och de som hade kommit ridandes genom den
If I look at the signal to noise ratio, change the frequency, it's now about 10 dB. When comparing to the Elad and the Mirics dongle, maybe it's fair to have a little bit lower signal to noise ratio, maybe like this.
Ibland såg jag engelska kanalen. nöjesbåtar som
or perhaps here.
Galeaser som styrde till havs och hela armador med sina rödpuffar, befästningar vid kusten, slott på ängarna. Jag såg min fars hus, min farbrors.
This quality isn't quite what one would like. I can hear some distortion. The reason is the signal here. That's the DC component, which is a little stronger than the signal. In Linrad, I can fix that by applying a notch. I click the 0 and make it 1. That means the first notch. Give it some width, maybe like that. And then move it to come on the problem frequency here. And that is position minus 150 perhaps. Not quite. Well, I can fix that by changing the width of the filter a little. And then, to make this notch narrower, I can expand the third FFT, like that. And then make the width figure smaller, let's say 5.
Från mitt eget stora hus i dalen som kastar av sitt mörker och genomborrade.
Now there is a notch that removes this thing, and the quality is perfect. And you can see here the signal to noise ratio is much better. So I can reduce the gain further, like that. And we have a better signal to noise ratio on the audio now than we had with the Elad or with the Mirics. It could be a good idea to switch the low noise amp off. Now you can hear noise. But I can increase the gain. And now the quality is similar to what I have on the other receivers. Something like this. This could be the appropriate signal level to use to check how sensitive is this dongle to interference. So I switch on the interference source.
Det sägs att hon kysste mig. Jag visste det inte då. Men drottningen glömde mig inte.
Here I can hear a small influence, really small. This signal is stronger than the signal that the other receivers could tolerate. So the frequency is now 89.146, and I stepped in 100 kilohertz steps upwards. And here you can see some spurious things. And now we are within the pass band and we have saturation. And now I'm outside again. And one more step. And here is the problem, 91.24 is the frequency. I go back to the same level that the other two receivers could tolerate, that's 5 dB below. And then I step the frequency downwards from 92.1.
Färgen hennes kinder röda.
91.3 to 1.
Med skrupplighetskricka.
And now we are inside the passband.
Drottningen älskar
But
mig.
when outside the passband,
Men
reception is mostly okay with the FunCube. But that's with the low noise amplifier off and the mixer gain on.
Så tycktes mig värdshusvärdens dotters kindförfriskare, skogvaktarens plikt. Och en dam vid vår.
I can do it like that instead. Low noise amplifier on and mixer gain off.
I en grå mantel som gömde klashanen vid mitt bröst och skrumpbandet från sin farbror i sällskap.
The performance is essentially the same. That's because I'm testing close range interference. That means plus minus only a couple of megahertz. Having the low noise amplifier switched off should allow better resistance against transmitters at large frequency separations, but that's not what this test is intended to. What we see is that provided that the center frequency problem, that means the DC component, is removed, the FCD PP is a little better than the other units tested so far, with an exception, of course, for the PCIe 9842, which is quite a bit better.
Sasha hade lämnat kvar några kläder ombord. Skeppet var skuggorna gradvis.
This is the Realtek 2832 chip with the E4000 tuner.
Ditt eget hem.
It uses the original Osmocom gain setting scheme at the maximum gain, which is 42 dB. And you can see the signal to noise ratio is quite good. I need a little bit more bandwidth.
Du talar om förråden att du omedelbart måste ge dig av hem till England igen. Det är tur för dig att du fattar detta beslut. De har börjat planera för att döda dig. Ja, även om du skulle bära några av de unga männen.
Compare this with the other receivers. I need to reduce the gain and get a similar noise figure. Otherwise, comparing on unequal footing is unfair. And you
Jag
can
sitter
see
på däcket till den förälskade damen. Det är egendomligt.
now I can hear a little noise.
Funderat över mitt kön.
And looking at
som distraherade mig.
some
Inte förrän jag kände kjolarna börja kring benen.
at the noise floor here, it's about 8 dB. So it's now the same as for the Elad. I switch on the interference source on 90.5 megahertz.
Konstruktion vilar på detta fundament. Erfarenheten är den juvel som gör vad som helst för att skydda.
Oh, and that's too much.
För ett man i sådär en 30 år som ambassadör. Om man har en drottning i sina armar och en eller...
This is the maximum signal level I can have. It is not very large.
Detta är absolut ett angenämt, lättjefullt sätt att leva.
I can go in finer steps.
De här kjolarna släpade runt fötterna. Och henne tyget i mest underbara i världen. Aldrig har jag sett min till sin rätt som nu.
This is where saturation kills this dongle.
Därför måste jag till min räddning i sjöman.
The signal level is here. It's minus 48 dBm. The other ones were minus 25. Or so. That's a big difference.
När han talar så går det en darrning genom mig.
Now, when the interference is outside the visible range, I can step it. Let's go downwards.
Mannens eller kvinnans. Det är alldeles underbart att ge efter.
The gain happens to vary a little bit. I don't know why the level varies a little bit.
Jag är egen hög person betalar för dessa begär. Regisseringen. Bara det kommer att ta en timme av min morgon. Tvättandet och pudrandet. Komma i korsetten och spetsarna. Byta från stilke till spets.
Now, the signal is outside the visible window. The alias comes in here. I can increase the level.
När jag är på däck så måste jag dölja mina ben eftersom sjömännen i masten stirrar när jag solar. Men de kan tappa fotfästet och falla.
This is the level where it fails.
Fan, Karl. Ja, och det är den sista svordom som jag överhuvudtaget får yttra. Och jag får aldrig mer slå en karl i skallen.
This is the level where performance degrades significantly. It's similar compared to the other receivers.
Dömer man till döden eller leda en harmoni?
And I continue to go down in frequency.
Det enda jag kan sätta foten på engelsk mark, det är att
and I can go up in amplitude.
Och fråga herrarna hur de önskar det.
And you can see that there is compression. The signal is going down because saturation happens in the front end of the dongle.
Palla från en masttopp för att man får syn på en kvinnas brister. Karosser.
I'm now listening to another E4000 tuner, which is using the sensitivity mode setting that is available in Linrad. It is maximum gain, and I turn the gain down to be fair in comparisons. Goes in 5 dB steps. Something like this gives a signal to noise ratio that is similar to what we had in the other tests. I go here, and you see it is near 8 decibels. Now I can add an interference source.
Att jag är kvinna, vilket betyder ungefär samma sak. Och 3, att jag är en ängel.
This is too much. I go down.
Om jag har 3 söner, så kan vi alla förklara att deras far är död. Med anspråk på att ärva all min egendom.
This is the point of saturation.
Jag känner mig
it is now, as you can see here, minus 43.5 approximately. Minus 43 and a half.
tisdagen, onsdagen och alla andra dagar han finner lämpliga. Han blev förälskad i en av man.
The upper window shows with the Osmocom setting. It is very similar.
På honom var jag och kommer alltid att få ut känns här, prima, perfektion.
And you can see the
Han säger att han har sådär 20 miljoner dekater i sitt kassaskåp i Stockholm. Han har mer jam än någon annan avgiftspanelare. Och han är
Oops. That was when the Osmocom thing saturates. Here is where linearity mode saturates. And that is minus 34. This is a 10 dB improvement. When I change the frequency to get outside the visible passband, like this, now we are just outside the visible window, and both versions of gain setting works fine. You can see on the spectrum here and on the spectrum here. I increased the interference level. And it's obvious we have compression here. Now, it doesn't affect signal to noise, but it reduces gain, and it certainly would produce intermodulation if there was more than one strong signal. Odd things happen. I'm increasing the signal level now in 1 dB steps. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the problem is this spur. So I changed the frequency a little, hoping to get outside, having no spurs. You can see there are many spurs here. There are not many spurs here. That's because the gain distribution is different in the Linrad sensitivity mode. It's more favorable in this situation. Here, the linearity mode starts to get some noise, but this is a very high interference level. It's now minus 24 dBm. Here I have two RTL dongles on the left side. The upper one is with R820T, and the lower one is with the E4000 dongle in the sensitivity mode of Linrad. On the right hand side there is the PCIe 9842. At this moment I'm listening on the 820. You can see it's moving here, while the other ones are off. I have a signal generator on this frequency here, and I turn up the level by only 2 decibels. And And you can see this is the point of saturation, and I'm just below it for the RTL dongles. The level, as you can see, is minus 42 dBm. That is 49 decibels above the signal I'm listening to. And now I will tune the frequency, and we listen to what happens in the 820. Look at the frequency here. We are about 1 megahertz or 0.7 megahertz below the signal, which is this. And here is the signal generator. Here is a mirror image in the 820.
Poängsammanställningen på YouTube-vinnare. De piffiga ostbesticken går till David Bötter.
And I go on the other side. Here is the signal. And I go upward. And you can see no more problems. I will listen to the E4000 dongle instead.
På minuten. I Radiohuset i Stockholm den 7 april. Programledare var Ingvar Storm. Notarius
And I turn the frequency downwards.
Producent Agneta Ekberg och tekniker var Lotta Linrad. Efter nyheterna här i P1 ska det handla om elbluffen via telefonförsäljning. Hur kan man skydda sig mot det?
And here we are on the signal.
Ekonytt.
And this is the mirror image in the RTL dongle. That can be removed by the calibration procedure in Linrad.
Det sa de själva när de visades upp för flera internationella journalister.
This is the aliasing frequency.
Vända hem, men man har inte fått några indikationer på när det ska kunna ske. Enligt tidigare uppgifter idag ska förhandlingar om frigivande ha inletts mellan den självutnämnde borgmästaren i Solgansk och medlare från OSSE.
Now I turn up the signal level by 10 decibels.
Kristdemokraternas partiledare Göran Hägglund markerar nu mot Folkpartiet som kräver en tredje pappa.
So we are nearly 60. We are 59 dB above the desired signal. And I'm listening on the E4000.
Björken börjat blomma. Årets säsong är den svåraste på flera år enligt Kerstin Almkudler som är intendent vid historiska.
There are some spurs.
Det var till exempel 20 stort på den år, så det är en av de.
Here is saturation. We're within the 2 megahertz bandwidth. And now outside.
Tidigare i veckan 10 000 pollenpartiklar per kubikmeter och dygn, vilket är ovanligt mycket, säger Kerstin Almkudler.
Det är väldigt mycket med tanke på att den gräns vi har för att säga att det är höga halter ligger på.
And I will listen on the 820 instead.
Och många märkte av snuvan.
Like that.
Luften och redan
and I turn the frequency downwards.
Trots att björken där ännu inte har börjat blomma. Men pollensäsongen är tuff, inte bara för allergikerna utan också för björken själv, vilket märktes rekordår.
You can see there are many more problems. And now we are within the visible window, so it's totally saturated. now outside again. But you can see the 60 dB stronger signal destroys performance in the 820 far more than in the E4000. I have now switched on AM modulation and turn the frequency range once more.
Ni har ju skickat ut ett brev där det står att jag är kund hos er.
Hör om vad som ligger bakom den senaste vågen av anmälningar till vår.
Then again the E4000 with the modulated signal.
Det är svårt att hitta alternativ i butikerna, men en förändring är på väg. Och så går vi på jakt efter bra service.
Det räcker med ett leende tycker jag många gånger. Det vill gärna kanske förstärkt med sig, men inte den mekaniska.
Och sist i programmet idag svarar vi på era frågor om pensioner. Varmt välkomna, jag heter Pia Fridén.
So, I think this very clearly shows that the 820 is not quite as good as the E4000 when the E4000 is run in sensitivity mode. So I switch off there and listen to the PCIe 9842.
Försäkringen har varit på tapeten tidigare. Trots att det låter bra att själv slippa leta och välja så blir företagen ofta använda av kunderna. Konsumentspar är det senaste i raden som fått hundratals.
And I have not changed the signal generator. It's here.
Konsumentspar utger sig för att vara en ideell organisation vars vinst går till välgörenhet. Men deras metoder att ragga kunder är ifrågasatta. Både av Konsumentverket och
that's the overtone of the down converted signal. I don't know where that nonlinearity is, whether it might be in the sound card, I mean the PCIe, the sampler, or whether it is in the mixer or the amplifier.
Kära kund, vi har hittat ett nytt och billigt elavtal till dig, som dessutom är miljövänligt. Och så skriver de att jag är uppringd av en av deras uppdraget att hålla fram ett bättre elavtal åt mig. Och att de nu har hittat den.
Det var i förra veckan som Oskar Kalmer fick ett brev från företaget.
This is the overtone when it is aliased all the way around here and then back in here.
Avtalen vad gäller el, telefoni, pension och försäkringar. Men trots att Konsumentspar skriver i sitt brev att de varit i kontakt med oss
and now add 15 more decibels of signal.
Då han får brevet.
Jag var rätt säker på att jag aldrig hade pratat med dem. Och ännu mer säker att jag inte hade tackat ja till något, att få deras hjälp att byta elbolag.
Oskar Kalmer säger att han aldrig varit i kontakt med Konsumentspar innan han fick brevet. Och just det bolaget tycks
and you can see there are noise sidebands.
Om man ska tro de nästan 100 anmälningar mot Konsumentspar sedan årsskiftet.
I don't know the origin of that. It could be the signal generator that is used as a local oscillator. Or it could be the signal generator I have running as a test source. But I don't but it is not the PCIe because it's better than this. I will now set up the Mirics dongle for wideband FM using non-zero IF and an adapted filter that is provided by the chipset. U for setup and A for setting up the input, and I to select a Mirics dongle. I have two of them, and I will use number 1 like that. And the best AD performance, that is 5. And the lowest IF B. And the IF bandwidth is A, 200 kilohertz. That's the bandwidth I have been using through these tests. And then a fairly high sampling rate. Let's make it 5 megahertz. Like that. And I don't know anything about the frequency error, so I just put a 0. And X, and save with W. And then I go for the FM mode. And it's already set up. The interesting signal is here. I have not included in the software yet the offset. I click here, and you can see the signal to noise ratio looks good. It looks like the frequency response is not flat. That is an artifact. I can sweep a signal generator through this frequency range. Here. And you can see that the signal level is flat. What we can see is that the noise figure is best at the center, but not as good at the ends of the passband. I can check the signal to noise ratio by going to another frequency. And you see it's about 13.5 dB. If I increase the gain, you can see that the passband looks more normal. It is nearly flat. But I have lost now dynamic range. There is no reason for that. Sorry. Make it 43. And you can see the odd phenomena due to the AD converter. They happen to be outside the frequency range of interest. So here I'm now listening. On this screen there are the R820 up here and the E4000 in linearity mode down here. And I turn up the level of the signal generator. Here is saturation of both, and I turn down, and the difference is about 2 dB, so they saturate at the same level approximately. Then I tune the signal generator, and you can see how I tune it in this screen, which is the PCIe 9842. And I add maximum AM modulation. And tune the frequency.
Jag tror inte att ni är onda. Jag tror inte att ni vill folk ont. Det är inte det jag säger.
Du ser det som att vi är ett parti bestående av, jag vet inte.
And that's in the channel.
Berätta för människor att det finns problem med invandring, men det är ju inte så. Det är ju tvärtom. Det finns problem med invandring och då fattar det.
This is the mirror image.
Det finns ett så stort problem med den nuvarande politiken att det kommer att vara så många som tycker det. Så att förr eller senare så bildas ett parti. Och om jag ska vara helt ärlig så tycker jag att det här partiet som vi har nu är ganska bra sett till tänkbara andra scenarier.
And now I increase the signal level by 10 dB.
Enligt dig. Du vet ju också att det här går hand i hand. Naturligtvis har inte ni
and tune the frequency range.
Att det existerar problem med invandring. Men ni har berättat för folk hur viktigt det problemet är i relation till andra problem kanske. Och det. Men ni skrämmer folk.
So there are two responses.
Retorik som gör att det blir alltså att
and nothing more. And now I increase by another 10 dB.
Yeah. Tvivlar du på lunchen och
and sweep the frequency range again?
Ja, varje gång vi bestämmer att vi ska ha en så undrar jag om det. Men vad kan gå fel? Försöker tänka, vad är dumt? Vad är problemen i det här? Och så försöker argumentera och resonera med mig själv. Så det är större värde att göra det än att låta bli. Jag gör det. Det är såklart.
So you have the signal there and the mirror here. And I don't know what that is.
Ge dem en legitimitet och för det är de motsatsen till vad jag vill göra. Men samtidigt så
and you can hear
jag tror ju på det här. Jag tror faktiskt bra mot varandra.
There is some noise. But you can see also in the 9842 we have some noise. So I cannot say for sure to what extent this is the dongle or whether it is the signal generator. The level is now when I switch off the AM modulation, which is of course making things even worse, it is now minus 20 dBm. So it is 70 decibels above the desired signal. And this is the strongest signal I can produce with this generator and this setup. It is now minus 14 dBm. And I will tune the frequency around a bit.
Inte kommer att höras i radio fram tills efter valet. Anledningen är att hans roll som debattör inte går att förena med Sveriges Radios regler. Det menar Lotta Mossberg som är kanalchef för P4 Radio Stockholm och ansvarig för sändningarna i P3. Han är ju känd hatare av Sverige. Och han brukar ta en bil och i en valrörelse så är det inte så klädsamt att
So, a little bit interesting. If I reduce the gain, it doesn't help. This is a sideband noise problem, mostly. But I don't know where the sideband noise comes from. It must be the dongle because I can check on the PCIe switch off here.
företag gentemot en anställd att jag blir förtalad.
So here I'm tuning now on the and listening on the PCI E9842.
Det finns ju inte att något annat företag skulle göra något liknande. Så alltså till mig är program, jag kan lugna ner dig eller klocka själv inte hur det har sitt mig. Och det drabbar ju mig. Så det som sprids nu från nazistiska och andra hatsajter är ju att jag har kontakt i radio eller döda Sverigedemokraterna, vilket jag aldrig någonsin har sagt, och ännu mindre i radio.
Bland andra sajterna Exponerat och Fria Tider skriver om såren och Sveriges...
At this maximum level, the Mirics is not quite as good, as you can hear. And that's an understatement. Now I can switch off the stereo here, like that. So now it's mono. And switch on a better detector. And it doesn't make much difference. But I can hear. I can hear the modulation at most frequencies for the interferer. So if I listen to the E4000 instead, here I have to use the other mouse.
Ogillar Sverigedemokraternas åsikter och tycker att de har rasistiska åsikter. Att det är det som gör att du får en fantastisk
I hope this video now has shown that these different dongles, they are a little bit different. They all have some weaknesses and they differ a little bit, but they are very cheap. A good advice is to get some different types and check which one gives you the best reception, because the sensitivity to interference is different.